Hi everyone, this is Point Blue Conservation Science, and we are currently at the Palomarin field station. We will be going through bird banding along with our fascinating spring migration. I just wanted to give a quick introduction as to who we are and what we're doing. We have a couple of banders that are also about to do a net run, and they're about to hopefully catch us some birds so that we can show you. But let's introduce everyone first, and then I'll start and talk about the rest of the introduction. So my name is Doris, and I came from Dallas, Texas, and I am one of the banding apprentices. Who's next?
My name is Hope. I'm also a banding apprentice. I'm from Illinois.
My name is Larissa, and I'm from Pennsylvania.
I'm Naomi, also another banding apprentice, and I am from Florence, Oregon.
Cool. Okay, so we are located in Point Reyes National Seashore, and we have been banding at this location since 1966. So we are currently still doing an ongoing long-term data set, and we're just continuing our data and studies. And the point here is to make sure that we are able to understand what's going on in population trends with the birds and the ecosystem. But since we currently have no birds right now, we would like to go into the topic of spring migration.
Yeah, so when we first arrived here in about mid-February, there were a lot of birds around here that are actually no longer here because they already migrated north. Some of those included fox sparrows, varied thrushes, and especially ruby-crowned kinglet, which were here in abundance when we first arrived. And actually the very first bird that I banded here was a fox sparrow, which was really cool. But we're seeing fewer and fewer of these birds here as they're moving through, and they're slowly being replaced by birds that will be here for the breeding season. So recently we had Wilson's warblers, orange-crowned warblers, some Pacific slope flycatchers, olive-sided flycatchers, and a whole lot of swallows arrive, and so they will be sticking around. So yeah, some of these birds have already started nesting around Palo. Some examples are like barn swallows that are actually building nests on the sides of our buildings. We have a few nest boxes set up around the station that we actually monitor, and we currently have some chickadees using one of the nest boxes, and western bluebirds starting to build a nest in one of the other ones. So that's been very cool.
So with nesting season, we have breeding season. So we get a bunch of hatchlings soon and shortly afterwards. But more than anything right now, we're seeing the nesting process. So we're able to see birds from a distance collecting nesting material or food gathering. And we have had, even afar from our field station, we've got glimpses of eggs and just babies in general. So we wanted to talk about the process of banding and like some of the things that we look for when it comes to young or the breeding condition of birds.
Should we get into banding?
Yeah.
Cool. So if you have never seen anything with bird banding before, so when we talk about banding, this is what we mean. So we have these tiny little aluminium bands that go around a bird's leg, and each band has a 9-digit number on it that is completely unique to that bird. You can think of it sort of like the bird's social security number or license plate. So no other bird is ever going to have this number. And this allows us to keep track of individual birds. And as you can see, we have many different sizes. So because birds come in all different shapes and sizes, we have a whole lot of different bands that allow us to tailor these the bands to go with the birds. So we have this fun little tool. So many of our birds, like we already have established sizes for them, but just to make sure, a lot of times we will measure the bird's legs, and so I don't know if they can like see the numbers on this. So the numbers on here correspond with the band numbers, and So all different sizes, and we would put these little slots around the bird's leg to see if that size band would fit. And
Are you going to try and do it?
yes.
A demonstration?
We do not currently have any live birds, so we have our little duct tape bird, very rare species, very cool. And the way we would go about banding this bird, we would hold it in what is known as the bander's grip, and that just allows us to keep control of a bird in a safe way. And so if we were going to band this bird, we would take its leg and this little tool and just sort of measure the size. So,
And again, we're finding the perfect size for this bird, so we don't want a band that's too loose nor too tight on the bird.
I think this one takes a size 1.
Size 1? Oh, wow.
Size 1, can't see it. All right.
So once we establish the size of the bird, we usually go ahead and grab one of the bands. And for this example, we
What
can
size
use
is this? These are actually size 1A bands.
1A.
But
Yeah.
we'll
They're
pretend
not-
for size
yes.
1.
So we grab our band, and we have special banding tools that are used to open and close these bands. And also these are made out of aluminum, so they're very lightweight and they're not intended to disrupt the bird in any kind of way. So we usually place it on there. We slightly open it. Don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, so these banding pliers each have a little pin that will allow us to open the band just like that. And then depending on the size, we would put it into one of the holes in the front. And that will allow us to close the band around the bird's leg in just such a way that it's not too tight, and it still makes sure that it closes the whole way. So I will come in from this side and then just close it. And then we check to make sure it's all good. And this looks beautiful. And there we have a banded bird.
We did have one question earlier of when the nesting season is.
Ooh.
Good
That is a
question.
good question. I feel like it's very variable as far as like I'm understanding it at this point, but for the most part, we start to see birds, depending on their species, starting to nest at this time period. They are building nests, and most of the fledglings that we will see will be coming in through mid-May, late May. It takes approximately, once they lay their eggs, it takes approximately 2 weeks or so for incubation, and another 2 to 3 weeks while the chicks are being reared for them to fledge, which fledging means that they are ready to jump out of the nest and fly off on their own and start looking for food on their own.
Yeah, and this really varies a lot between the species. So we already have seen some young hummingbirds flying around, so we know some of those have already hatched and left the nest, but other birds are just starting the nest building process, so it's really a very wide range. So once we have banded this bird, we can go on to determine the age and the sex. And so there are multiple ways we can help us come to like a decision on how to age and sex a bird. And that depends very much on the species. The first thing we would kind of look for at this time of year, when there are a lot of birds starting the nesting process, is we can look for breeding condition. And so that could be either brood patch in most female birds, or what's known as a cloacal protuberance in male birds. Yeah, you want to pull that out?
We do have an illustration to kind of get an understanding of what a brood patch is. And we like to say at what point the brood patch is. So our brood patches will be found most commonly in females, but there are certain species that both male and female have brood patches. So the brood patch is just a naked patch that starts to form along the abdomen of the bird, and its intention is to, you're losing the feathers, and the whole process is to incubate eggs and to keep them warm. So throughout, it gets a little nasty after some time period. But the first sign that we see is a naked abdomen, and then it follows with like fluid forming under the abdomen. It gets all wrinkly, and there's fluid under there, and then it just gets like really swollen. But it's just an indication that this bird is nesting and laying on eggs. And then for our males, we look for cloacal protuberance, which, do you want to explain cloacal protuberance?
Sure. So the cloacal protuberance, as the name implies, it forms at the cloaca, and so the male bird's testes enlarge during the breeding season, and so depending on where they're at, we will also give them a score like with a brood patch. And so if we see an enlarged cloaca, then we can definitely say that it's a male.
So those are some indications of an older bird, and we can't necessarily micro-age a bird by then, but we can tell that this is an adult and ready to breed.
Yeah. So we know that it's definitely not a hatchia, which is a bird that has just hatched this season. So they're still juveniles and they're not going to be breeding right now. So if they have breeding condition, we can say it's at least in its second year of life. And so sometimes we can go on to say that it's after second year. And that it really depends on the species. Sometimes we can go by plumage characteristics. But a lot of times we're looking for we'll be looking at the wing of a bird. So duck-tailed bird doesn't have a wing, but we'll be pulling out the wing and looking at the flight feathers. And in a younger bird, so a second-year bird, so a bird that would have hatched last year, they would still have some of it, but they might still have some of their feathers from their hatching year. And so those are usually of a lesser quality, and we can actually see that difference in the wings. So if they have that, we can definitely say it hatched the previous year. A lot of times we don't know if it's in the second year or after second year, and we'll just not attempt to age it past after hatch year.
Can you say a little bit about why using cloacal protuberances in brood patches is super important to be able to sex birds, because a lot of them we can't.
What do you mean?
Like we can't tell otherwise unless we actually...
Yeah, so a lot of birds will look the same, like the males and the females will look the same, and we can only determine the sex of a bird based on their breeding characteristics. So if it has a brood patch or cloacal protuberance. Some species, both a male and a female will have a brood patch, such as in wrentids, and in that case we cannot sex a bird based on the presence of a brood patch.
No
but we
plumage.
can based on cloacal protuberance. Right, so
we did have a question. Lishka was asking how people can help birds during the nesting season, and if you can repeat that.
how can people help birds during the nesting season? So I would say most importantly, just if you see a nest, don't try to approach it. You can watch it from a distance, but don't make it obvious. So the main thing is you don't want to disturb the birds while they're nesting, and also you don't want to potentially lead predators to the nest.
So an interesting fact that I didn't know is while we were, I guess, seeing some nests building and we found a couple eggs one time, is that I had no idea that we leave scents behind where other predators can actually follow the scent. So even though we don't touch the eggs or anything, just us being around the area can draw in other predators and actually attract them to just like look around and feel suspicious, and they might find the eggs then. But I don't know what else can help out.
And watch out when you're trimming vegetation.
Oh yeah.
That's true, yeah. Make sure that if you're doing any kind of gardening around your house, be careful not to cut areas that have nests in them.
We do have nest builders that are like on the ground, so those are very tricky. And they're not always in trees. They're in weird little cavities. They're just like right above like tall grass sometimes. So it really is a matter of making sure you're looking and being aware of your surroundings.
Cool. So, continue with debanding.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've talked about how we age and sex a bird. Next, basically what we would do is if you have seen people banding birds before, then you might have noticed that we blow on the birds a lot. And the reason for this is that we will be looking for things on the bird that you can't see because they're covered up with feathers, and so you have to blow on the bird to try and separate out the feathers to see what's like under the skin, because birds have very thin skin and you can actually kind of see through it. Actually, one way that we can use this to our advantage is by doing what's known as sculling the bird. So we have this nice little chart here. This would actually go along with aging the bird as well. So a young bird during its first year of life, so when it will go through this process of like growing a second layer of bone over the skull. So when they first hatch, they only have one layer of bone, and if you were to kind of look through the feathers, you would see it's just kind of a dark pinkish color. And then as that second layer grows in, it's sort of connected to the first layer by like little pillars of bone. And you can see those pillars as like little dots on the skull. And you will be looking at the bird's skull and looking for these patterns that can help you determine whether or not that bird hatched in that year.
And we call this process ossification of the skull. So what's interesting is that we have some bird species that actually still retain some of those small little windows. We like to call those windows when they're not completely ossified. And it can be really tricky because we are like on the fence of like, is this an adult bird or is this just a young bird that's getting to the end of that, cycle of their age?
Yeah.
Remember about how long that takes process? 3 to 6 months usually.
Yeah, so that takes about 3 to 6 months, depending on the species, depending on the individual. So an adult bird will usually have a skull of 6, so it'll be completely ossified and won't have any of these windows.
I did have, I'm going to back up a question and talk a little bit about, the question was, what do data like age and sex about individuals tell you about the health of bird populations, or why do we collect that information?
Okay, so we collect that information.
Again, what information?
Okay, so the reason we collect aging and sexing information is to help us understand what is going on in the ecosystem, in our local environment. So with age, it helps us understand if there are more older birds surviving versus our younger birds. So we like to call that productivity and survivorship. But
one bird from Texas.
it looks like we got a bird. But it helps us understand.
We've got some coyotes out.
Yeah, it helps us understand what is happening in our local environment. With these population trends, it can also let us know if there's something changing, as in like habitat changes, disruptions. So that actually helps us, especially with a long-term data set, since we've been banding since '66. We can start to really acknowledge what species are being affected the most and what is happening with the current bird populations. I don't know if I fully answered that.
I think that was pretty good. Nice. Cool.
Well, we'll do one more question before the bird comes. There is what, if you have a sense, we talked about this, Lizzie, what percentage of nesting birds are successful at raising young?
Ooh.
Ooh. So in a good year, even in a good year, the nesting success is actually pretty low because there are many dangers for nesting birds from predators or weather or just any other kind of disturbance. So even in a good year, the nest success might be as low as 30%. It oftentimes is lower than that.
Except for our wren tits.
Wren tits, yeah. So some species do put, I guess, kind of more effort into the raising of young, such as wren tits, and they will usually have a higher success rate because of that. But yeah.
Okay,
So-
so we got a bird. So one of our
exciting.
banders just handed us a bird.
What is it?
Yeah, that's the big question. What is it? Feels like a very feisty bird. So luckily we'll be able to show you the process on a real bird.
Do you know if it's a recap or not?
I am not sure. I don't know any information on this bird.
Cool. A surprise. It's like Christmas.
It's a big bird. Oh my
Oh.
god, I'm so excited.
So do you want to show them real quick?
Yes, it is.
So if anyone has any guesses as to the species, you're welcome to put that in the comments.
All of its colors.
Yes. Look. Or I don't know if this one's a missing, but it might, yeah. Oh, no wonder you're so kicky. Alrighty, so I don't know if anyone was able to identify this bird, but this bird is a spotted towhee. And one of the main things we look for are these little spots on its flank of its wings. And then it's got a very pretty rufous color. Excuse me.
These birds are also very feisty.
Extremely feisty. Yes.
I know,
And then we also have the gorgeous red eyes that they get as they get older. But we're going to go ahead and start the processing.
Yeah, so this bird is a recap. So it's already been banded.
We call it a recap, but it's short for recapture.
Yes.
So the first thing we do is give the number information. So this is upside down, so bear with me. 742-44566.
Wait, hang on. Can you repeat that?
Okay, 742-44566.
It's only had 8 numbers. It's fine.
Oh, okay. So 742-44566.
Yes. Is it because of the size?
Well, it's an older band.
Oh.
Cool. And
Okay.
so some of our birds around here are also color banded, and we have these adorable little colorful bands, and we each have our own unique sequence so we can keep track of individual birds even if we don't recapture them. So even if we see them, we know it's that bird.
Okay, I'm going to give you the color combo. So we have WBO \S.
All right. Yeah. And so the color banded species are our study species, and we used to follow these birds and like do a lot of nest monitoring on them. We're not really doing that currently, but we're still keeping track of the color banded birds, and we're still, if we catch an individual of that species, we're still going to put color bands on them. And do you have any?
Sorry, I'm just trying to age my bird. I noticed that there's a huge difference between this. I don't know if that's always the case. But
It does look like it.
Yeah.
It does look like a pretty good difference.
Yeah, so Doris is currently looking at the wing, and she noticed that there is a little bit of a color difference in some of the feathers. And so, do you suspect that it is a younger bird?
No.
So, yeah, spotted towhees a lot of times do have a little bit of a contrast between
a
the feathers,
very
even when they're older. So we don't always use that as a reliable
Yeah, because
aging
that's
technique.
I think it counts.
okay.
But it's definitely something to keep note of.
I'm calling this a second year.
Okay.
And we
Based
can,
on the limit.
Yes.
maybe we can, as you're blowing for breeding condition.
Show. Yeah, there is breeding
Yeah.
condition on this bird.
Very
Okay,
exciting.
so this bird has a CP, so what we call the colecoprotuberance. And I'm gonna blow right underneath, and you'll be able to see the like a bulge and pinch. Oh, let's wait for that wind. So that bulge just indicates that it is in breeding condition. So you can do LB or LC. Yeah. Okay, what else do I need?
And then,
It's a male. C.
yeah, and because it has that cloacal protuberance, we can definitely say this is a male. What are you scoring that CP?
3. I would say I'm gonna 9 the skull, and then I'm gonna do 1 for fat. No feather, no molts of any kind. What else
Yeah,
do I
so
need?
another thing that we look for as well while we're blowing all over the bird is to see that bird's growing any of its feathers. So if it lost any feathers at some point, it might be growing in some new ones.
The next thing we also do is we look for molts, which I blew all over the bird for already, and then I didn't see any molts on its body or its flight feathers. And then the next thing after that is we look at their wear. So they start to build some wear after some time at the very tippy tips of their feathers. So we just kind of score that. And then also for fade, we look for fading. We look to see where the bird closes its wings, and the bits that are the most exposed, we look to see if there's like any fade that has occurred. It's hard to see on the camera. Any fade that has occurred due to like sunlight. So this is one of the reasons why birds replace their feathers so often. So my wear is 2, my fade is 1.
Okay. And then next, Doris is going to measure the wing of a bird. So just to see how long the wing is.
Skip the weight.
85.
Skip the weight.
Same like
You said 85?
85.
Okay.
Nothing else, right?
No.
Cool. And then we release our bird.
Yeah. And because this bird is color banded, we actually bring it back to, or close to the net where it came from, because we wanted to be able to head back to its territory in as little time as possible.
So, well, you can just grab the bird from her, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
Gotcha.
Great.
What site was this at?
Site 1.
Pexa?
What time was it net run?
9:40 or something.
9:35.
Is it warm?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then we'll get the rest of the info.
Yeah, we'll get that later. Awesome. So, you got to see a bird being banded. That was awesome.
We do have several other birds that are coming in, so we are starting to pick up and get busy. But since we are apprentices, I do want to say that this is available every season. So we are currently doing the spring and summer season, and then we also have like a fall and winter season. So if you are curious about it and are interested in learning and being a part of this, you should look at our page on pointblue.org. And also, if you're interested in helping us with our efforts and supporting us and just want to know more, please go ahead and look us up on pointblue.org, and you'll get more information there.
Yeah, and if you want to take that support a little bit further, there is a big donate button on the website, so it would be very much appreciated. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this Facebook Live. We were very excited to share this with you. And yeah.
We'll see you next time. Bye.